Hello, and welcome to another episode of The End of the Search. This one I call it Atonement and Forgiveness, How to Practice. Well, it's based on a question someone asked that says, "Good evening, Nick. This is the first time I've written to you, but I have seen some of your videos. Could you tell me how to do atonement for myself?" Well, these questions come from someone who is obviously a Course in Miracles student, so I'm going to answer using that language. But before going into the answer, I just want to point out that these videos are always pointing to the fact that I am. In other words, it's not about what the individual do, either as a practice or anything like that. It's just the fact that we already are, which is the essence, beingness, which obviously words cannot describe. But because the question was asked according to the teachings of A Course in Miracles, so I'm going to answer at that level, and this is what I would say. First of all, notice the question. It says, "Could you tell me how to do atonement for myself?" Well, we don't do atonement. In other words, it's based on a phrase on a course on the Manual for Teachers that says that for the teacher of God must remember that the atonement is for himself. What it's pointing to is that the atonement is not for anyone or for the world or anything. It's just for myself, because I am the one who believes to be separate from the source. Now remember that the Course is not talking to the individual. There's no individual. He's talking to the mind that is supposedly projecting this individual. So the healing, if you want to use that word, is for oneself. It's for the mind itself. It's not to try to heal anything outside, because again, that would contradict where the Course is pointing to. That's why the Course says there is no world. This is the main teaching the Course is trying to teach. And then there's another line that says, "Seek not to change the world, but to change your mind about the world." So it's always about remembering who I am. That's why the atonement is for myself. Now, I would like to address forgiveness and atonement, because in the end, I believe the question is pointing to how to practice forgiveness. So, within the Course in Miracles language, according to my understanding and my practice, there's a difference between atonement and forgiveness. In other words, forgiveness would be the practice that we do, is the procedure to eventually lead to the atonement, to the recognition of the fact that I am. So forgiveness is what the individual practices while it perceives itself as to being separate from everything. And once everything has been forgiven, then all that there is what have always been. So the atonement will be the consequence of the practice of forgiveness. So the question here is more like, how do I practice forgiveness? You see? Well, if you look at A Course in Miracles, throughout the whole Course is always pointing to not believing the content of the mind. If you look at chapter 4, if you're willing to renounce to be the guardian of your thought system and offer it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you back to God. In other words, if you're willing to know that you know nothing, the correction takes care automatically. Okay? In chapter 14, when your peace is disturbed in any way, shape, or form, just say this: "I do not know the meaning of anything, including this. Therefore, I do not know how to respond to this, and I will not allow the past to be the light to guide me now." The past means the thoughts, whatever. If you look at the lessons, lesson number 1, nothing means anything. Lesson number 2, everything has the meaning that I have given you. Lesson number 5, I'm never upset for the reasons I think, and so on so. Lesson 23, just find what the cause is. The cause is a thought. Yes, that's it. Well, then drop it. That's it. Just first find the cause and now drop it. And when you drop it, the consequence is the correction. You see, that's why it says that the first 2 steps, you needs your help, but the third one doesn't need any of your help, because it's the correction. You see, If right now you're completely disturbed and everything, and you just stop for a moment, assess, and just relax and remember that nothing means anything, when you're not identified with the content of the mind, what is the consequence? The peace that we're talking about here, which is what you are. If you go to lesson 189, forget everything you've learned about the world, about your everything. Literally, it's a beautiful paragraph, and it ends up saying, forget this world, forget this course, and wholly empty-handed come into your God, which again, surrender to what is. If you look at the meaning of forgiveness doesn't do absolutely anything, doesn't do anything. It simply observe and judges not. Well, all of that is basically pointing to the fact that if you don't believe the content of the mind, you see, that would be the quote-unquote practice. If you look at the Bible says in one sentence, be still and know that I am God. Same thing. Well, the language that I use in these videos is, if you don't believe the content of the mind, what remains? You see? That would be the practice if you want to use that word. What happened is practice is something that is actively done to eventually get to, but what we're pointing to is just to what is. Right now, if you don't believe the content of the mind, if you don't believe your thoughts, what remains? And if you answer, you went back to the mind, because I'm not asking for an answer, I am pointing to what already is. You see? So regarding to these questions, or this question, that's how I, put he calls the atonement, I call it the forgiveness process. That's what it is. And when you don't believe the content of the mind, you are in a content state of forgiveness. There's nothing to forgive, nothing to be forgiven from or of, but this is the language that it used, because the word forgiveness, we tend to use it to think in dualistic terms of I forgive you or you forgive me or whatever. But really it's just a word, but you don't even need the words. So that's why, again, with these videos, although we may be saying the same thing, I choose not to use a language that pertains to a particular teaching, because I don't want to limit everything to one particular teaching who does have its own specific language. So to generalize it is very simple. Whether you're Jewish or Catholic or Course in Miracles students or Buddhist, it doesn't matter. If you don't believe the content of the mind, what's left? What remains? What remains is what is. And this is what the videos are pointing to the fact that you are. I am. Love is. God is. And that's all there is. Well, that was the inspiration that came through. I hope it served. And as always, may peace permeate the mind so that love can be extended.